Okay, hello everyone. Today I'm joined by a special guest to talk about innovating with services and services marketing. My first repeat guest, is Carolyn Henderson. She is
Honored to be
honored to
here.
be here. Going to be graduating this afternoon or participating in an internet-enabled graduation from Cal Berkeley with her MBA. And then before she starts her consulting career, she has a fun fall lined up. Why don't you tell us about that before we get started?
Sure. I'm going to be a fellow on the congressional campaign for Natalia Linos. She's running for Congress in Massachusetts. So if any of you are from Massachusetts or care about progressive politics or just getting, she's an epidemiologist. And there are only like 7 scientists in Congress. Do you know that? Out of like 500 Congress people, only 7 scientists.
That's
So if you care about
shocking.
getting well, I think it's a compelling moment to bring someone in because we're going to have to be deciding like what does a vaccine rollout look like and how do we try to invest in the infrastructure so that we could be a little bit better at dealing with something
And
like
how to
this
figure out that climate change
in the
is a
future.
hoax.
And how do we actually make some movement on climate change? So, anyways, Natalia for Congress, if you want to donate or follow, um,
I think there's particular rules
we'll see
against
politics.
bringing politics into the classroom, but since you're a guest,
Oh,
I
that's
think
true.
you can bring your politics into the classroom. I'm not
You're
I'm
not
not endorsing
commenting.
it. I'm just being sarcastic. Okay. Anyways, a lot of politics and campaigning is very relevant to marketing. So in that sense, it's not just you doing your pitch. So we'll see if some of this will help you do a better job in your efforts to help your campaign go well. So we're talking about innovating with services and services marketing. It's our last topic for the quarter. And it starts out with thinking about marketing as delivering services, not products. So, what's the job to be done? And understanding that around some product, there's a whole bunch of other activities related and even unrelated that occur before, during, and after the consumption or the use of that product. So, the product itself comes alive in the context of trying to get something done. So, this is a hat, but it's also a way for me to avoid having sun in my eyes or having to do my hair. So it's accomplishing something for me, and something else could also accomplish that. But although it's produced and manufactured somewhere else and sold through retail distribution, it becomes alive or creates value in its use as it helps me accomplish the job. And
So this lecture is more about how do you position things as doing a service versus how do you market a business that is a service.
it's both, but if you think of products as part of this overall job to be done, you can, as a company who might sell a product, expand what you offer to provide more solutions and not just a physical, tangible product. Because a lot of times the total value that the consumer gets is through the product becoming alive as part of a total way of solving some job to be done. And so if you think about the amount of value that the consumer gets that's coming from the product itself, it's relatively small. And so you can capture more value or innovate and be able to provide more value and capture more value if you expand your thinking to realize that the consumer has objectives that extend beyond just purchasing this thing. Traditionally, marketing is the idea that you go to market with your goods and then you exchange them at a marketplace, like a town square or something like that, a bazaar. Um, Now in this world, right, companies are coming into our homes with Alexa. They're like with us always, and so the boundaries between the purchasing and the consuming are shifting more towards additional involvement of the company or the service provider. So we don't just say, what are you selling in terms of your product? We think of it as an offering. And the offering could be a product component that's tangible, but it also could be additional services around when that product is consumed or why that product's consumed. So we'll talk about all that. We'll talk about the key characteristics of services and service quality, which is how you kind of monitor that you're doing a good job and providing value and not screwing up. And with services, there's more areas to screw up. So it's a little bit harder than just producing some standardized thing that goes out of your factory and you just kind of forget about it. And lastly, we'll talk about how to innovate with services. So if you're a product company, how can you add services? Or if you're a services company, how can you add something more tangible like a product to capture more value? And usually if you offer both, you're able to have more of a sticky experience and have better customer retention, better customer loyalty. It's not always possible, but you see a lot of companies that maybe traditionally sold a product that are trying to layer on additional services, or someone that just sold services to add something more tangible. Okay, so why should we concern ourselves with services? Why should I have a whole entire lecture? Why are there whole books, whole classes on services? Well, historically, we were much more of a manufacturing firm, and all the things we'd think of as a service we would do in our own households. So you would paint your own nails, you would give yourself a massage, you would do your own dental care, right? But now we're basically going outside of ourselves and going to the marketplace to hire for more and more services as we get more and more efficient at producing the basic physical goods that we need in our lives. So think about in the 1800s, right? What percentage of the labor force would be basically focused on farming? Maybe it's like 90%. But now through innovation, technology, globalization, and trade, we've gotten really efficient at doing things that we've been doing before, which frees up resources that can be redeployed to other ends. You think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the bottom is, I think it's like physical needs and safety, right? The top is self-actualization, maybe, something like that.
I think you're right.
And
Yeah.
so as we get super efficient at solving the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we start putting our energy, our resources towards addressing things that are kind of higher up the pyramid. And at that point, we look to experts. We again do division of labor. So instead of giving myself a massage, I might hire some brilliantly trained masseuse or something. Instead of just teaching myself by just buying books and reading books, I can go hire a consultant. Right. So the tangible book, right, would be the way of just buying knowledge. Now you can just, hire a specialist to come in and help you with whatever you particularly wanted to learn. So, makes sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
So as an economy, our manufacturing has declined, and in many ways we expect to decline even more in terms of jobs. We might actually have an increase in manufacturing as people are concerned with global supply chains and like not being dependent on another country for materials you need to fight a pandemic, for example. But even if we bring a lot of that back to more domestic production, we'd expect to have more automation, robotics, AI involved in that. That's basically like Andrew Yang's campaign, right? And so back to the politics. So, but we've seen tons of job growth in services, and actually right now with a lot of the in-person experiences being shut down with coronavirus, we've seen this huge hit to unemployment. And actually, in the workforce, we've seen this shift from mostly basically people out in the public workforce being men has shifted more to actually the majority being women, and a lot of those women are in roles that are in the services industry. And so the recent kind of lockdown in terms of employment has actually hit households hardest that have female income earners. Interestingly enough.
Just overall, the percentage of women unemployed is disproportionate.
Yeah, which is interesting because the last recession, it was the opposite. A lot of the manufacturing had left, and construction got hit really hard. So, anyways, that's the direction our society is moving, and services are the future. In the past, you would own the asset, And now you can just buy the moment, right? That's the whole idea of Waymo or Rent the Runway. You guys talk about either of
Hmm.
those in your MBA?
Yeah, I just took a class. It's funny. I just took a class with a bunch of, I guess you'd call them like practitioners from the design firm IDEO.
Uh-huh.
We were talking about it was like a design thinking
Yeah.
course around the future of money, but sort of just the future of like economic trends. And we actually talked a lot about like how the sharing economy is sort of the basis for potentially a circular economy, um, which would help us achieve a lot of our goals. One around just access, like people can either access luxury that they couldn't before,
Mm-hmm.
and so millennials are driven to sharing and businesses as services, but also for the sort of future of what it looks like on an environmental front, like
Yeah.
removing waste,
Yeah.
that a service economy can be less wasteful
Yeah,
potentially.
definitely. So the idea of if we're getting most of our value out of these kind of higher level benefits, right, without having more materials being consumed, we can actually have a more enhanced experience. I just
Mm-hmm.
bought a book that I haven't finished reading, but it's called More for Less that talks about things like this soda can, basically the amount of liquid that we want. The job to be done is to get that liquid inside our body, right? But the thing that it comes in, this can, right, is not what we're interested in. And so it's costly to produce. And so a lot of innovation and engineering has gone into reducing the amount of materials that go into producing the can because it's more expensive to ship, it's more expensive to create. And so actually, this is recently the first time ever that we've been able to increase kind of standard of living while decreasing the amount of materials that are going into that improvement in standard of living. And things like
Right.
Rent the Runway, potentially a Waymo, would be
Mm-hmm.
part of that movement. So I think the CEO of Rent the Runway, Jennifer Hyman, she's brilliant, great to listen to her podcasts that she's interviewed on or read any interviews she's given. But the basic insight is, hey, we're going to get all these nice dresses dry cleaned after we wear them every time because that's like proper care. We can get them dry cleaned and then have someone else wear them. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you get 10 wears out of a fancy dress, that's good utilization of that dress. So if you kind of use it through this rental model, you can have more access to a better wardrobe for less money, and it's, you know, less wasteful, or it gets more use out of the asset. So,
Yeah, totally.
um,
I think it's interesting the class that we took in the IDEO class, the way that they were conceptualizing it was thinking about sort of like trends in the economy broadly. If you're
mhm,
trying to innovate in this way, thinking about trends broadly in the economy, understanding a consumer's potential pain points related to those
yeah,
trends, and then tracking pain points against jobs to be done.
yeah.
So in the case of Rent the Runway, whether that's from a wanting access to luxury that you can't
Or
afford,
even just storing it,
um,
like the closet space is an issue. Like if you want to
or a
have
closet
a
space.
variety of
Yeah.
outfits, there's the whole storage and maintenance. You can just put that on someone else. So it's changing the
Yeah,
boundary
totally.
of who's doing what, where the main thing the consumer wants is going to stay the same, but all the peripheral activities can be shifted, and that's an area for an innovation.
Yeah, absolutely.
The thing you brought up with money is another example of like money used to be these physical, tangible assets, right? A piece of paper with the right ink on it, or a coin, you know, pressed in the right way. Well, now it's just a number on a computer. Ooh, I got a different number on
Hmm.
my computer today. Oh man, the number on my computer went the wrong way. Like that's money being transacted, and you know, you got all the crypto enthusiasts trying to add scarcity to that, which is fascinating. There's also this new thing that's happening where we're just increasing the money supply like crazy as we're trying to, you know, support or stabilize the economy through this pandemic.
Right.
And people are worried about potential inflation, but so far we haven't seen it. There's also this idea that
Yeah.
we have to pay for it with taxes, but we just run a deficit and we can just print more money. So as long as people think the money is valuable psychologically, it can remain valuable even as you increase the supply. So
Yeah.
it's a brave new world. We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah.
This graph comes from one of my favorite business authors, thinkers, Ben Thompson's Stratechery blog, which I know I've tried to get you to read some, but it's this idea.
Behind a paywall.
It's behind a paywall. He's doing a podcast now behind a paywall too. So,
Yeah.
um, but anyways, it's this idea that a smiling curve is in any value chain when you have all these kind of inputs that go to ultimately having a consumer get something of value. There's all these different points of input. And the places where there's the most value added, or at least the best opportunity to capture value, are at the initial stages of the value chain and the end stages of the value chain. So R&D and design would be like the engineering and the creativity of coming up with, some new, better solution.
Yeah.
And downstream, you would have the services and the marketing of getting it into the hands of the consumer and making them, experience the most value out of it. So this, hat, you add this little symbol O and this little Nike sign right there, and all of a sudden it doesn't just provide me protection from the sun or an escape from having to care about my hair, but it provides me a sense of identity, a way to signal belonging to something bigger than myself. So that's all services and marketing. It adds a lot of value, but doesn't add a lot of cost. Manufacturing in the middle has been the place where there's the most competition, and so the hardest place to capture value. So if you think about Apple, designed in Cupertino, manufactured in some, a huge, crazy supply chain, global logistics, where they're, making sure they're getting, the cost to produce as low as possible and the quality as high as possible. So you got, what's that company that they use as their main contract manufacturer?
The Chinese one.
I think it's actually
I
from
forget
Taiwan.
the name of it. Oh, really?
Gosh, I feel silly for forgetting it. But anyways, it's so important that we can't think of it. But you have to have incredible world-class operations and lowering costs to compete by just doing the manufacturing, just the product assembly. The competitive success of being upstream, you have to have world-class technology and design and be basically human capital. Right? This place requires a lot of physical capital and labor. And downstream, what's great is you just have to be the best in your region. If you can just be close to the customer, you can win. So you can win through relationships and escape competition. So if you want to be lazy but still capture a lot of value, this can be a good place to live. Here you have to be brilliant. Here you have to work super hard. Here you can kind of just be good at cultivating relationships, being close to the customer, communicating in the language that they use to think about their problems so that they can envision the solution, so they can come alive in their own mind. So definitely being situated in the United States where there's a huge consumer purchasing power is a big advantage just by lack of birth location or whatever, if you want to be here. So this is an example. IBM and other big computer companies like Dell, they would manufacture these big mainframe computers. So they would buy components from like Intel, right? Intel would make some really good chips. That's that crazy design part. They would put it in their processors and they would get close to their customers and they'd provide all these services on top of it. But what Amazon did is they said the job to be done is actually the compute and the storage of information. And people don't actually want this big box that has to be managed and takes a lot of electricity, and you need kind of experts to help get the most utilization out of it. And guess what? Like if you have a big spike in demand, let's say you're an online retailer and there's, online Black Friday or whatever the sales they have, Cyber Monday, well, all of a sudden you need way more computing power just for that one weekend. So Amazon's like, hey, we'll basically have these big warehouses of computers and you can access them on demand and we'll have experts. And that's really the job to be done. So they don't really manufacture or compile the products, but they go ahead and have that relationship with the customer, and it is more flexible and better to fit with the job to be done. Same thing with Netflix and Spotify. Closer to the customer, they're actually in the living room. They're in your ears. They're in your pocket, right? So more convenient, close to the customer. All right, so that's kind of why we need to be concerned with services. So if you're concerned with them, then the next question is, all right, I care. Now tell me how to do a good job. What matters about services? I've learned about marketing, but what's unique for services? And so that's the next phase here. Um, did you have a class on services in your marketing? Or did you take a lecture on it at all? Was it a focus? You talked about for that design thinking, but
Yeah, we take a core class on design thinking where you think a lot about innovation and how that's connected to product innovation, but also like marketing and building out services.
yeah. So in that design thinking, it reflects all this services thought, which has been an evolution from this more product-based marketing where our field has started. But what we define as a service is any economic activity where the output is not a physical product or construction. So it could be an idea. In your case, if you're going to try to help a politician get elected, right, you're basically selling this person, but what you're really selling is what that person represents to the voter and their hopes, aspirations, concerns, all bundled into one, which makes it so hard because customers are so diverse. So what's relevant to one person isn't necessarily relevant to the other. One thing that's especially important when we think about services is it's consumed when it's produced. So you don't really buy your haircut ahead of time and then have it shipped to your house. That's a wig. That's a product. If you want a haircut, you go to the haircutter and the stylist, whatever, and they can, not only provide you a haircut, but they can make you feel good about your haircut. They can make you feel more confident. They can comfort you or give you basically like free therapy. So it's this whole experience, but the problem is because it's consumed and produced at the same time, and because you have customers and employees coming together to like co-create this experience, then there's lots of places for variability. Versus if you're just producing some manufactured output, you can have a very standardized, procedure-based. You can have a lot more certainty. You can do it whenever it's convenient. You could do it round the clock. But if you're consuming something when it's produced, you have to kind of aggregate supply and demand. Airplanes have that problem. You can have a factory create airplanes 24/7, but they're only going to be flown when people want to go from one spot to another, when it's convenient for them, when it fits in their life, etc.
Yep.
So because it's intangible, there's all these other benefits that we as marketers can promise and can try to provide. And what's cool is a lot of these don't actually cost anything. It's like amusement. It doesn't add much cost to the product to make it more amusing. Comfort, confidence,
Maybe.
peace of mind, right? These are a lot of times what we're selling. We're not necessarily selling the physical good. We're selling these, higher level aspirational concerns like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So it's intangible. We don't have inventory. We don't have patents. It's difficult for customers to visualize. So we want to think about what are visual cues we can provide to our customers. Why do colleges spend so much on having beautiful campuses? Well, when you make that decision to go to college, you usually go and look at how beautiful the campus is. I've never had a single prospective student ever sit through one of my lectures, but they're always wandering around campuses. It's because if they came into like a 400 level course, why would they be able, you would hope that there's something they've built upon in years 1, 2, and 3 that would get them to the place they would get more value out of a 400 level course. So
You think that's why they're not sitting
no,
through your course?
obviously it's boring, but the idea is you can't visualize knowledge. You can't come in just for a few minutes and get some visual sense that knowledge is being created or all the kind of tertiary benefits around college are being provided. But you can go and experience the physical college atmosphere and have a sense of, oh, this is a place I belong. This is a place that feels like where I can both be comfortable and also stretch. I don't know. So it's like you provide these old trees that have been there for hundreds of years, and it's like a sense of, oh, there's something that grows here. It is old and steady and tradition, but there's growth. You know, how much a big tree can convey. It's amazing. Um,
People are definitely making that decision based off
well,
trees.
when you graduate, you get a little cap and you get to put the tassel from one side to the other, and it's this visual symbolism that some threshold has been crossed. So you throw your
Yeah,
cap into
I
the
think that
air.
matters a lot.
I mean, it wouldn't matter if there was something real that was physical, that was tangible, that had taken place. Like we could give you your knowledge box, but that doesn't actually exist. So we have to give you all these symbolic representations of these higher level pursuits that you're going after.
Sure.
A nice thing is, if you're in this business, is pricing is not based on cost, it's based on value. So how much does confidence cost, right? If I give you like a piece of advice as a therapist or kind of work something out with you and you get a lot of value out of that, you'll pay a lot for it, even if it costs me nothing to produce. A big trend right now is the work from home debate. And if you have people work from home, do you pay them based on the cost of living if they go live in the middle of Montana versus in San Francisco? So like Facebook just announced that they're going to pay people less if they live in a low cost of living place, but they'll allow you to work from anywhere. I'm thinking all these people should
Interesting.
move to Oregon, but
I mean, I bet if people can work from home, they move to, even if they're going to make less money.
well, the idea being to buy a, you know, standard 3 bedroom home in the Bay Area is costs at least $1 million, but you could buy a pretty nice place like that in Eugene or
Yeah, of
Portland for a lot
course.
less. So, should Facebook pay you as much? I would argue yes, because the value that the employee can provide isn't based on how much it costs for them to live. It's based on how much they can improve their company's ability. So, like, drug pricing is a big problem, right? You can think of drug as a product, but it's really just, very inexpensive to manufacture. People can charge a ton because you want to be healthy, you want to be alive. Now we feel like that's wrong, so we want to put some restrictions on it. But education's getting out of control, healthcare's getting out of control in terms of costs because the value seems to have no upper limit, or at least
Right.
we're struggling to find that upper limit. Um,
Right.
and then we also do stupid things that make our costs go way up, but that's just poor operations. So that's the first kind of key thing about services. We talked about co-production and use. I think it's very hard to decentralize, right? So that gives an advantage for people that are local. The local incumbent, the local provider has an advantage over a foreign or distant competitor. Usually it's perishable, right? You can't give a return to a heart surgery you didn't like. It's hard. There's a lot of effort to match supply and demand. Another key factor is there's a lot of heterogeneity. You can't standardize things like you can with product manufacturing. So one area I think that marketing fails or companies fail is they are afraid of the heterogeneity, the differences. So they try to standardize processes, but in doing so, they turn their employees into these robots, and then the employees do something wrong, and or just they're unhappy because they don't feel like they're fully human in their work. Um,
Yeah. There's a great book. I think it's called like The Good Job Strategy. It's a professor from MIT who talks about allowing your employees to respond to customer heterogeneity is actually like you said, a way that it creates a better job for
yeah,
those folks, and that can be done in any industry. But it's obviously especially important and probably adds more value in a services capacity.
yeah. I think it's very dehumanizing for customers and employees when employees feel like they just have to follow the rules, even though it's like you're looking at them like, "Are you serious? Like, come on, this is so obvious." And it's like, "Well, the rules say da 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 da." So,
Yeah.
it's like that United Airlines flight where they dragged that doctor off the flight. Remember that? It was a big controversy.
Mm.
he like got all bloody, getting dragged because they overbooked the flight, and no one would volunteer to get off, and so some policy doc said, for whatever reason, like he was the person that had to go, and so they
And
physically removed him from the plane, and it was on, iPhone footage, and it was a disaster for their brand. But
yeah,
that's because they had, a policy doc that said this is the way it has to be done. Well,
yep,
why don't they just empower their employees to give bigger discount or bigger incentives to have people get off the plane when it's overbooked? They have
yeah,
some upper
totally.
cap. That's, let's say it's $800. Like they should uncap that, right? Well, the problem is then I, as the employee, basically know this flight's going to be overbooked and make sure you book it. And then I just say, oh, no one would get off. So I gave her $6,000 and then you pay me some money under the table. So,
Yeah, but I think
yeah.
I think the idea that you're going to encounter fraud is maybe overblown in people's minds. And I think that at least around this good job strategy, the research is that if you train people to do their jobs in a flexible
Yeah.
manner, you end up having cost savings in the end because you have employees that work harder, that you
Yeah.
have lower employee turnover, there are other longer term benefits.
Yeah. So the solution is to allow some empower your employees, right? But have some procedures, training, standards in place. I think if you can observe when people break a norm, then you can just have it be flagged. So you're empowered to break a norm or to break a policy, but it gets flagged, and then we can debrief and understand why and see if we need to tweak our policy.
Exactly.
So do it retroactively, not proactively. That way you can kind of give people that decision-making power, but then make sure that fraud's not happening or have a way of
Yeah, exactly.
investigating.
Yeah, and that's honestly a way where you're going to get more information from your employee about your customer.
Yeah.
Anyway, like what are the unique needs
Yeah.
that the customer had that require the employee to respond in that way?
Yeah, it could lead to some innovation or just a way of being better than competitors by picking up on some aspect of your experience that's not perfect as it was originally designed.
Totally.
So there's 3 additional P's for services. I should quiz you. What are the 4 P's of marketing? You're
They
not a marketing
are
concentration. You're just an MBA. So you don't. You can still
they
graduate.
are people,
Oh, the 4 main P's.
place,
Yeah, place,
place, purchasing power.
product, place,
Same thing. I actually don't
price.
know.
Usually there's price
That's a good
and
one.
promotion. So those are considered the marketing mix. Those are like the 4 things you do to get your product aligned to your customer. You think about the price or the cost for them, which might be more than just the dollar amount, but basically what it could be like
Sure.
waiting in line, right? That could be a cost, a time cost. But the cost, the place, which really is just all distribution, promotion, which includes advertising. A lot of people think of marketing only as advertising. It's just one
Right.
aspect of promotion. And then, wait, we did place, promotion, product. What's the what are they buying? What are they going to get? So with services, we think of 3 additional P's. We think about people, so the employees and customers, and how there's lots of heterogeneity, and do they get along? Do they match? Are they well suited? Are customers attracting other customers? Are they repulsive to other customers? The physical environment, since there's co-consumption and co-production that occur at the same time, what's the experience like at the point of consumption? So there's lots of work on atmospherics, facilities, material. People are doing all this effort to make it more safe to consume. Would that be ventilation, having things outside? And then the processes, so the procedures, the flow of activities, because usually it occurs, or the consumption process occurs over time. So what precedes it, what comes after it, what are the co-occurring aspects of the experience. If you understand that all very well, you can look for areas to innovate, to stand out, to be different. One of the key things that Starbucks did is they paid their employees more, gave them better benefits, and were able to provide a higher level of experience for their customers because they were basically able to recruit, retrain, and get better effort out of their employees. So
They've also worked really hard to improve their processes related to like ordering online, ordering through their app, and how that
mhm.
pickup process looks, how that payment and pickup
Yeah,
process
some
looks.
people say in the U.S. that Starbucks was the first kind of way to break digital payments. People paying through the app to get extra rewards was the
Mm-hmm.
first kind of
Right.
widely adopted digital payments that occurred. So overall, we want to always, in any place of management, be able to have some feedback to see how things are going. When we think about services, we think about service quality as our kind of rubric of success. And it's generally comprised of people's expectations versus their experience. So you go into any service encounter with certain expectations, and if the experience matches that or exceeds your expectations, you would say that was a high quality service experience. And it's very context specific. So if you go to McDonald's and you're ready to order and it takes a long time for them to take your order, you would be upset. But if you went to a fancy restaurant and it took a long time, that'd be great because you go there to enjoy the whole atmospherics, the experience, the music, the ambiance. So like you're actually getting value out of the time you spend waiting in a fancy restaurant with a beautiful view, but not so much when you go to McDonald's, right? So,
I think that's really
mhm.
well. One question I have for you is what's the um, I hate the term best practices,
Yeah.
but like, what do people say are best practices around making sure that the way that you're collecting service quality doesn't over index for people who had a really good experience or a really bad experience?
Yeah.
Or do you just anticipate that that's going to happen?
Yeah, so oftentimes like ratings and reviews on websites are based on people that loved or hated the experience because they're actually motivated,
Right.
or they're just kind of over communicators, oversharers. So they might not be representative of the sample as a whole or your customer base as a whole. But you can
Right.
kind of take that as a given and look for changes over time. So it might be biased here to begin with, and it's biased here later. But because those biases are constant, the changes over time would be from some other change. So you're really not getting too excited about the any number, but you're more benchmarking across maybe different employees or different groups or over time. So that's kind of one clue you're looking through in your data is adjusted for, the knowledge that there's going to be some sampling. And then you can do other procedures to try to get responses in a more rigorous process or a more representative sample. But I'd
Mm-hmm.
say, and oftentimes in our data, we know it's biased, but if we can know that, then we can control for it and still pick up some signals that we can act upon.
Interesting. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Um, so with service quality, we know that our customers have some zone of tolerance, and with those people, they're not going to uh, kind of provide ratings, maybe. But if the experience falls within some range of their expectations, then they're fine. That's what they wanted. They paid for it. They got their money's worth. But it's really where the experience falls above or below that loyalty is determined. But if you surprise someone, delight them, their expectations will shift up. So if you get a little, sit down at the restaurant and they come out with a little appetizer plate that's extra and you feel like, oh, this is so fun, so exciting. You go back the next week, they don't do it. You're like, oh, disappointed. But you didn't pay for that ever. So like managing expectations is really critical in any service experience. Most people think you want to go over and above to get loyalty. But actually, what some research reveals is that when things are bad, is actually the opportunity to create loyalty. So this is service failure. Something was worse than your.
So the way that you respond to a service failure actually creates greater loyalty. That is really
Yeah,
interesting.
because think about it. Like if you have a good friend who you've kind of gone through some shit with, and they were there for you, like
Oh yeah, totally.
you, or they just showed patience or showed understanding, it's like sometimes you have to see someone act at their worst or have them see you at your worst and then still have things resolve in an okay manner that trust is built. But if everything's kind of hunky-dory fine, there's no basis for that deep trust that can be a
Yep.
source of loyalty. So the problem is you just can't screw up and not be aware of it and not repair. But it's those repairs that can build that kind of longer lasting trust. All right, guessing game. What do you think are the 5? So, a bunch of people do a bunch of surveys and they see what predicts service quality. What aspects of companies, service providers, predicts service quality? There's a bunch, but the top 5 drivers. If you just think of companies that you think are able to provide high quality service consistently, what characteristics of them would come to mind?
Is like friendliness of employees or responsiveness of employees?
Yeah, you kind of got. I'll give you 2 points for that.
Wow.
You got 3 more to go.
We don't get a reveal. I want like a reveal. Like I
don't have sound
Family
effects.
Feud style.
No, cha-ching. She's the winner.
Show me customers.
Yeah. This is not a game show. Actually, how about this? For everything you get right, I'll give you $10 for your graduation present today.
Wow.
So you got $20.
Well, you said I already got 2.
You can get up to 50. You want to make more guesses?
Wow. I do.
Okay, what else? I'm giving you 2.
Okay. Will you restate for me the 2 that I got?
I'm giving you responsiveness, and you said kindness. Okay. I'm going to give that empathy. I give you
Oh, these are like personality traits.
No, those are the 2 most personality traits.
Oh, okay.
The rest of them are harder to get, I guess.
Okay. I was going to say timeliness.
Yeah, no, I'll give you that one.
Something. Okay.
Well, that's kind of like.
How do they phrase it?
Reliability. Okay. So that's
you're very generous. You're a very generous game show host.
All right, I'll give you all 5 of them. Congratulations. We're rounding you up to 5 out of 5. So reliability. So can you count on them? Right. So reliability has different components, but one is, are they kind of concerned with your best interests and able to deliver on their promises consistently?
Yep.
Responsiveness is if something gets brought up or if there's kind of input to them, do they react in a timely and thorough manner? Assurances, so there's a lot of risk oftentimes in service encounters. You might be, that's that co-consumption. So you might be bringing someone into your house or into your, into your life in a personal way. So like having Alexa in your life, that's some service, but you want some assurances that it's not going to be used against you, and there's some care that have been put into it.
I'm taking notes in your class.
All right. I can give you the link to watch this video again. If you have trouble falling asleep or you want to judge yourself, I talk funny or whatever. I say too much. That's what I always think. Being empathetic, and then the tangibles that come with it. So having a bunch of old growth trees on your campus, right? Having pretty buildings, whatever are the tangible aspects that come with it, is key. And if you can kind of have those together, then you're really good. So like an Apple Watch, right? You got the physical, tangible components of it, like how light it is, how it looks, but then it also gives you some assurances around health that it can pick up if your heart rate is deviating or if your blood oxygen level is dropping. It's responsive in that when people make complaints or there's bugs, they come out with a new update quickly that improves it. Is it reliable? Well, hopefully so. Does it work as you expect? Do you have some assurances if something goes wrong? About like it should work in underwater, such like that. And then are the employees you encounter? Yeah, and then is it empathetic? So if you score high across all those, you'd say the total service quality was high. The experience met expectations or was above expectations. Obviously, how much you pay comes into that expectations component a lot. If I'm paying a lot, I expect a lot more than if I'm not paying as much. So as a company, if you're a consultant, you might have fancier looking slide than this, but basically you would do an analysis for your client to try to find out where they might be having potential service failures or unexpected gaps between what was expected and what was the actual experience. So the customer over here has expectations and they have their perceived experience. And then as a company, you can do all these things that might contribute to an unexpected gap, and especially an unexpected negative gap that you want to be on the lookout for. So this comes down to these processes in place that can help you minimize the chances of a negative gap, and if you have negative gaps, you can at least observe them and respond to them, hopefully quickly, and build that long-term trust and loyalty. So it starts out with the company's perceptions of the customer's expectations. That's having that good data. That's that question you asked about. What if we're only hearing from our complaining customers or our happy customers, or we're being there's some bias in how we're getting feedback on how we're doing or what the expectations are. So being thoughtful around understanding your customers. Obviously, empathy of your employees matters, but if you're a big company, you have a research team that's critical there. Then with that, you can design some standards and service processes that would hopefully map on to those expectations. So if people expect to wait for 5 minutes, you've thought about all the variability that can happen in your business and make sure that you've got procedures and processes in place to match that variability so that you can consistently deliver on that 5-minute expectation. Then you have the actual execution. And lastly, the hardest one is the communication to customers. So if you promise the pizza will be there in 30 minutes and it's not, well, that was the stupid thing to do. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. The problem is a lot of times the incentives of a company are set up to overpromise and underdeliver. Now that could be because you give someone commission for bringing in a new customer. So they want to promise the world, and then the people that have to deliver on those promises are kind of set up to fail. It also can just be a nature of the beast. So for a lot of products, it's actually meant to be part of a service, such as you buy a guitar, you hope to learn. Anyone who's going to show you, what a guitar can do isn't going to show you the struggles when you first start to play and you want to give up. They're going to show you the end outcome. Well, usually when people buy something that involves learning and training and effort, they kind of are overconfident with how quickly they'll learn before they start trying to learn. And then they become underconfident about how quickly they learn once they encounter their first struggles. So there's kind of this trough of despair.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and so really how do you meet them at that moment of first struggles and help them readjust their expectations to the point that, yeah, you can learn, you can get through this, you can pick up your skill set or push through this initial stage of resistance. So communication should be dynamic, and you should think of it as a process, again, that consumption experiences over time. So you have to communicate to get them to unlock that value and get that job to be done. So, got it?
Got
you
it.
Can take this into your consulting role. So we're going to do a 5-gap analysis. Sounds important. A critical incident is just when the gap widens unexpectedly. If you can monitor for it, if you can find it, if you can debrief with customers that are quitting, you can sometimes figure out how to address it. And accountability is huge. Again, that's kind of that overpromise, under-deliver. You need a single person or group responsible for the whole system. Because if you just split it all up, people, attack their one issue, but do a poor job of having everything aligned. All right, that's the boring stuff. We got that all the way. Now I'm going to hit you with the exciting stuff.
Wow.
Then we're going to talk about innovation. Who doesn't like that? Unlocking more value.
Loves innovation.
Expanding the pie for everyone. So this is about you're a product company and you want to add services to innovate, or vice versa. We're going to start out by talking about Cone. Do you know anything about Cone? Do you know anything about elevators and escalators?
I am a customer of both elevators and escalators.
Can you think of any elevator companies?
No?
Yeah.
Couldn't tell you a single one.
Well, Cone's going to be your new favorite after today. So
Great.
They manufacture elevators and escalators. They were founded in Finland in 1908. That was a good place to be when it came to this product manufacturing. Why? Because the European market over the next few decades grew and then bombed itself to smithereens and then had to build itself up again. So you got to sell things twice. And then it got bombed again, and
Wow.
then you got to sell it again. Two big wars
Wow.
for,
Lucky them.
well, the main point is that Europe was growing up, and as you were growing up, you needed ability to help move people and things up and down, and that's what they
Yep.
provided. But over time, things got not so great for them in their business. Why would that be the case? What would be some problems they encountered, let's say around the late 1900s, early 2000s?
Specifically at that
Yeah,
time.
just with your knowledge of world history and Europe and moving things up and down, give me some guesses.
Well, you have a lot of old buildings in Europe.
Hmm.
And so you might not want to put in new escalators to make them look ugly.
Yeah, it would be some visual discongruence of some fancy new looking escalator in some old building.
Yep.
Basically, yeah, there was decreasing demand in their local market where they had home court advantage. And where
Sure.
was growth happening in terms of building out cities? And
The United
and
States.
other developing countries, Hong Kong,
Yep.
Singapore, um, you know, Central America, the Panama City, whatever, So just basically
Yeah.
lots of places where they didn't have as much of a location advantage. They actually did pretty good in
Okay.
the United States, so like East Coast cities, but those were more mature cities. There wasn't as much construction happening.
So they created a consulting company to consult other local
No, they
businesses
did. They did
designing
planned.
people
They did
moving
planned
devices.
obsolescence. Did you know how Apple got in
Yes.
trouble because their phones
Yes.
and their batteries was getting bad?
Yeah, I think it's real.
So yeah, if you have really good quality of products, then people don't need to replace them. So just make your products worse. But that's
Yeah.
not a good way to keep customers happy in the long run. They'll,
No, it makes me very
yeah,
angry.
it creates an opportunity for a competitor to come in and say, "Hey, we'll make things that last." So that could be very destructive. So they got really good at quality, and it didn't need to be replaced as much. It just needed to be maintained. So the quality increased, less replacement orders in existing markets, and then there's globalization, which means that there's customers in foreign markets, but there's higher cost to sell, there's more risk, geopolitical, culturally, distance, currency, etc. There's also price pressure from global manufacturers. So other companies said, hey, we can create things that help people go up and down, and we can do it for less money. So they had high quality and low priced competition from global manufacturers. They were even trying to sell into their home
Sounds
market.
tough.
So even in to European cities. Yeah,
Finland
Finland. Um, so what do they do? They're going to transition.
created a consulting
Yeah,
company.
yeah, basically, kind of. So first, they start out as just transactional sales. This would be the salesperson. They say, "Dear Mister Manufacturer of this building, or operator of this building, owner of this building, buy my elevator." And in order to get the sale, they said, "I'll throw in maintenance if there are issues," but they wouldn't charge for that maintenance. As they realized that replacement orders were dwindling and more maintenance could actually extend the useful life of a product, they said, let's charge for the maintenance. So they negotiated maintenance visits up front. It's kind of like when you buy a new car and they say, okay, every so many months or so many miles come in and we'll do some free oil change or
Yep.
whatever. Um, but what was useful about that is it changed the relationship from trying to just sell you something and have you go away to creating these relationships in terms of contracts and norms, which paved the way for them to learn more. So some knowledge for sustainable competitive advantage. And
Yep.
in places where they had lots of customers, the density of all those customers, all those buildings together, meant they could be really efficient with their maintenance. So they could have like one maintenance person on call to serve a lot of people in a small area, which was a point of differentiation from a foreign competitor. So now you're going to get that next building is being constructed, and we're going to compete with some foreign manufacturer to, create the elevators and escalators for that building. Well, we can say we have a
they have a network effect.
we have a responsive, person just down the block to help with maintenance. Who do they have? They might have a cheaper elevator, but you're going to want maintenance and responsiveness over the life of the elevator.
Yep.
So those are kind of a nice change, but still it wasn't so great for them because it still was mainly built off of selling new units of elevators and escalators. So the final beautiful solution, this is chef's kiss, is they transitioned to selling a solution. So what's the solution? What does the owner of the building, the operator of the building want? Who are their customers? And what are they concerned with? What are they ultimately concerned with? What's their job to be done?
They are concerned with making sure that they have people paying rent in their
happy
building.
People that pay rent on time. And if that rent payer is living in the building, well, then they're going to be obviously annoyed. But if they're working in the building, if they don't have a good elevator that's operating as expected, that's reliable, etc., then they could actually lose out on sales and actually lose out on ability to even make payment. So what they want is just kind of an elevator and escalator that's working at a certain quality. They just want it to work. So what they want is that resource, which is, again, it's like that dress, the insight to selling Rent the Runway. It's like they want the momentary availability of the resource. So that's what we should sell them. So this is how it's going to cascade in a brilliant way. You're going to be applauding at the end of this. You're going to want to go send Cone a letter of appreciation for their genius. So they're going to charge pay per day of operation at a given level of quality. So you want the premium package, the elevator will have videos in it and be fancy and have, go really fast and stuff like that. Or you can pay for a cheaper level and it'll be a more basic elevator that maybe doesn't go as fast or whatever, but it'll still be charged to you on a per day basis or a per hour basis or a per minute basis, okay? We will handle all install, replacement, maintenance, insurance, everything. All you got to do is just give us money every time it's working to your satisfaction. Did you get a day where it worked to your satisfaction? All right, some money is coming to us.
How do you create that contract, though? Because you're asking the consumer to take on increased complexity.
No, you want to decrease their complexity. They don't have to worry about anything.
Having to know how many days I'm using my elevator.
No, it's basically you're going to pay every single day and you just don't have to pay us if it's not working.
I see. If it's ever not working, then we don't pay you.
So now we're aligned in our interests. Your alignment is to have it working. My interest is to have it working. So we've now perfectly aligned our interests. And you don't have to worry. We're going to decrease the complexity because we're going to take over all the install, all the replacement, all the maintenance, all the insurance, all the kind of any aspects to do with the elevator.
So all of those things weren't happening.
A lot of those things originally would be basically handled by the building owner, operator, or construction company. Because they would buy it from me, but they would have to install it themselves. They'd have to worry about replacement. If it stopped working, they would have to think about buying a new one. And there's mental energy that goes to that.
So we'll service the entire thing.
Yeah, they'd have insurance that it would be working. Because if it wasn't working, they would want some insurance company to pay them before because they were going to basically have upset customers, potentially lose out on revenue.
Got it. So the per day amount is just almost a selling technique to be able to say, listen, we guarantee our service to such a high degree that on any day that it's not working, you won't pay for it.
And it's like all these movement to this business model innovation, like subscription as a service. Right. It goes from like going and buying your groceries to basically subscribing to Blue Apron, and the groceries just show up and you just cook them, and it comes with a recipe or whatever. What I love about this is why it's the chef kiss, is once we have this arrangement, I can now buy other manufacturers' products because you're not buying my product, you're buying the total solution. And part of the solution is the actual elevator or escalator. And you don't
Right.
really care whose it is as long as it's good and it works. It meets some quality
Right.
threshold and it's up and going. So if my competitor
Right.
comes out with some brilliant way to manufacture elevators and escalators at higher quality and lower cost, I'll just buy it from
I'll
them.
just start doing that.
And now my margins increase because I still get paid the same amount from my
That's
customer,
great.
but the cost to replace an elevator has gone. Look at you.
Really good. That's how impressed I am.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's kind of like what Zoom is providing and Canvas is providing. They're providing the availability of this resource. So yeah, it transitioned to being about just manufacturing to here.
Cool.
It's going to make our efficiency go up and our reliability go up because that's what we're going to be paid based on. And our costs
Yep.
are going to go down because we're going to, when appropriate, buy from our competitors.
That's great.
Yeah. So the integrated solution, you're going to bundle your services around some core product. You're going to add more service capabilities. The kind of classic consumer example recently would be the iPod with iTunes. They both made each other better. So you wanted to buy the iPod because you had all your music on iTunes. You liked iTunes because it worked really well with the iPod. Create some loyalty. So the next time it's time to buy a new iPod, you buy another one from Apple, not whatever the Zune was from Microsoft. And then you get to the phone,
Yep.
you get to, or the iPod Touch. You can take over different roles. So before, your role was manufacture the product, and the customer's role was figuring out someone to install it, or to operate it, or to whatever. You say, no, we're going to shift the boundary of who does what. So you'll pay us more, but you'll get more out of it, and you'll have to do less. You can solve for risk. So oftentimes you'll pay for insurance. So Airbnb or there's like these dog walking companies where you can pay someone to walk your dog. Okay. Once I get you, let's say I hire you to walk my dog. Once I get you to walk my dog one time through some platform that I find you on, I could be like, hey, I'll pay you less than it costs me. And you'll actually get more money because the platform isn't going to take a cut. So instead of me paying $25 an hour and you getting paid $15 an hour and the platform getting 10, I'm going to
Right.
just pay you 20 directly. And so I say 5 and you get $5 more. Well, what those
Right.
companies provide beyond just the original matchmaking of the provider and the customer is because they have so many dog walkers across the country, they can actually have insurance such that my dog gets sick or killed or stolen or anything bad goes on while you're walking my dog, you're not liable for it. So you might still
Yeah.
want to use the Airbnb or the dog walking platform or whatever because they've solved for risk, they've solved for payment. There's also other assurances of confidence and comfort. And they might have a whole team dedicated to what happens if a dog gets lost and they're on a walk or it happens to die or whatever, right? They might have a whole concierge service around that. Yeah. So you might have some concentrated knowledge for these edge cases, and you can kind of consolidate that and then apply that when needed in a way that any individual operator couldn't do as well. So it's pretty powerful. Yeah, it's a little bit harder to be innovative when you think about services, but all that design thinking is relevant there. One thing that you can do is you can have like different stores that might be innovative stores where you try out new things. Like Starbucks has one of those in
Yeah.
University Village in Seattle.
Yep.
You can do let 1,000 flowers bloom. So like Walmart allows their managers to have more control over one small aspect of their store. The rest of the store is very centralized plan for scale and efficiency, but they allow one small part where people can do whatever they want, and then they can sit back and see is there any spike in sales or something unique happening there, and maybe some new good idea has been surfaced by someone with local knowledge, or just the variety of people trying different things. So they can find out what that is, and they can tell everybody, let's copy that. So that's kind of like variety with systematic duplication.
Cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of other ways to innovate in services, but those are just kind of two of the few.
What was your point about Facebook ads going to be?
Oh, I don't know. That's a carryover from when I made these slides at a different time. I mean, with Facebook ads, you can do tons of experimentation.
Right.
So maybe that was my point. Like, instead of just doing one ad, like a one big Super Bowl ad, you could spend the same amount of money with like 50 different Facebook ads, see which ones
Yeah.
resonate, and then you can use lookalike audiences to double down and get a lot more of those. So
Yeah.
maybe that's what I was going to say. I don't know. I use the same slides over and over again. It's efficient. I'm going to update them around the edges, but sometimes there's carryovers. Okay, so oftentimes we want to think of as any consumer experience as jobs to be done with a customer activity chain. So there might be one given product that's part of that customer activity chain, but there's all these different things that precede it and complementary products and services that go around it. And so you want to understand that full spectrum to see if you're a provider where you fit in that spectrum, and then if there's an opportunity for you to kind of change the boundaries and take over something else. So if you, I don't know, what's some category that you've been thinking about purchasing recently? I'm trying to do some live examples.
Um,
Have you-
what have I been trying to purchase recently? Maybe new chairs for my table, because now we're sitting in our chairs at home a lot more than we used to.
Yeah, that's true. I heard Room and Board was having an uptick in sales, whatever.
I believe it.
So yeah, if you are in the furniture space, then you might think about design. If you're in the design space, you might think about furniture construction. It doesn't have to be you actually constructing it. You could just find a contract manufacturer and put like if I'm an influencer on marketing around design, home design, I could launch my own brand for the manufacturing.
Yeah, totally.
You can get into the financing of it. You can even get into like remodel or I don't know.
Yeah, totally.
Anyways, that wasn't beautiful. I was testing my brilliance that you were going to
No,
say
no
something
French
and I was
kiss.
going to,
No chef's kiss
no, that
there.
was pathetic. So, but basically you can break it down into temporal, what comes before and after, and then the kind of other related categories. So expansion.
Yeah.
And then just change the boundaries between who does what. Be more helpful. Okay. So, this is a lot of companies who used to be in manufacturing only and transitioned to have more and more of their revenue come from services. So they started out, all of them had 0% of their revenue coming from services. Then over time, they increased the percent of their total revenue that came from services. So on the x-axis, that's what we have. We have the ratio or the percent of revenue that comes from services. And they tracked this from 1990 to 2005. This is actually research that my advisor published right as I joined the PhD program. And the y-axis is how valuable the company is using Tobin's Q, which is like a hybrid of accounting metrics and kind of stock performance. So what you see here is initially the value of firms decreased as they started to try to generate some of their revenue from services, but ultimately paid off in the long run when they generated a sufficient amount of their revenue from services. So change or doing it half-heartedly actually decreased the revenue of the firm or the value of the firm. So you have to reach some critical mass. And then the improvement is faster and larger if it's a related service. So obvious. Don't go into something
Yeah.
completely unrelated. Increase your spending on research and R&D because you need to develop some knowledge-based secrets. Like we talked about, like you have knowledge around the edge cases and expertise that can be used to both attract customers, and that's what you're basically oftentimes going to be selling.
Yeah.
So have that be complementary. It helps a lot if your core market is actually slow growing. So in this case, we talked about the elevators declining. Or when Apple launched iTunes and the iPod, they were actually getting their butt kicked by Windows in the PC division, right? So why is that important? Because oftentimes it requires a big cultural change. It requires employees to do something they hadn't done before. And people aren't going to embrace change if it ain't broke, they don't want to fix it.
Oh, that's really
Yeah.
interesting.
So,
So change is harder if your company's
yeah.
not doing
And
poorly.
catching that next wave, especially if it's a big change, like from just being a pure manufacturing company to someone that's going to sell services,
Yeah.
requires you to be willing to change. Everyone kind of say, okay, we're at war. It's time to double down, spend more on R&D, and actually be open and willing to change.
Yep.
Similarly to the last one, if you have high level of competition in your core business. So again, Cone or Apple, they both had lots of competition, slowing growth, and they went with something a lot different and got a huge increase in value. You also might need to have a new sales force because it goes from trying to convince someone, like persuade someone to buy, to actually getting paid for the knowledge and expertise and value you can add, and basically taking over more responsibility. So it's more of a
Yep.
relationship consulting type sales relationship, not a persuasion type relationship. Okay, I don't want to talk about these last two. Ta-da, we're done. You get to graduate. We kind of already talked about
Yay.
these before. So,
That's awesome.
yep, you already took all your classes, you already passed all your classes, and here you are getting extra
But look, I
course
learned
material.
extra things.
All right, did anything
That's
from
great.
this seem like you could take it with the idea of helping out on a political campaign?
I think a lot of the stuff around how do you create loyalty with people? How do you be responsive to people you're trying to connect with? And how do you frame what someone's doing around the things that uh, constituents are facing? I think
Yeah,
that helps a lot.
I think one thing with politics that's so hard is you have this vast, diverse customer base or constituency, and then you also are unique to who you are, whatever your strengths are as a
Yep.
politician. And politicians oftentimes try to be adaptive and adjust to the concerns and needs of the vast, constituency. But in doing so, they lose some
Seem
authenticity. Yeah.
inauthentic. Yep.
So you can
Totally.
get, be like a certain politician who's seems very authentic and not very adaptive, and actually that resonates with people because
Right.
um, they can say, okay, that person is someone who's seems more real, even though they're lying all the time. No
Yep.
shots fired. Uh,
This is your last class, anyways, or second to last.
yeah, and I got tenure this year, so I'm good now.
Lucky you. All right, I gotta hop off because I gotta go to
All
a
right, well, I'll
call.
see you on your graduation Zoom
Okay.
later.
See you at
Congrats.
graduation.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
All right, everyone. Thanks for watching all these lectures. Hopefully, you got something of value from them. And if not, you can return to them later and hopefully they'll be of value. And if not, you can always hit me up and ask me for more direct help. So, anyways, have a good